month, and benefits could be paid in as little as 24 hours.
How did she qualify? You know, with her health issues.
With these policies, health issues don't matter. She was so relieved.
Policies are available with no health questions, no medical exam, no blood tests.
I just assumed life insurance would be way over my budget.
No one kept a tighter budget than Mom. If she can manage the rates, you can too.
But did her rates go up every year?
Nope. There's a rate lock built into the policy.
Policies start at just $6.38 a month. Your rate is locked in for life. The cost of a funeral can be $9,000 or more. With one call, you can give your loved ones the protection they need to help pay these costs. And unlike some policies, benefits are payable from the first day.
Mom just felt better knowing we'd have help, and I couldn't be more grateful. You should call United of Omaha.
I guess I'll never stop learning from my big sister.
Don't put off life insurance. Call United of Omaha today.
Call 800-274-2851. You can't be turned down. Call today to lock in your rates. 800-274-2851. That's 800-274-2851.
When a cyber thief transfers the title of your home out of your name, it's a race against time to stop the theft of your hard-earned equity.
Many people don't know this has happened until long after it's done.
You as the homeowner think you still own a house. 3 months later, you start getting foreclosure notices and you realize you've got 4 mortgages on your house that you didn't even know existed.
So when's the last time you checked on the title to your home? Find out if you're already a victim at Home Title Lock.
Welcome to Securing America with me, Frank Gaffney, the program that's a kind of owner's manual for protecting the country we love against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to the glory of God and His kingdom. We're going to talk about something that is on Donald Trump's mind. And when he first spoke about it recently, I think shortly before he was inaugurated, it caught a lot of people by surprise, prompted a lot of, consternation in some quarters and simple ridicule in others. It's called Greenland, an enormous island and strategic asset, currently, nominally, the responsibility of Denmark, but increasingly in the crosshairs of enemies of our country. And we're going to talk about what that portends and why Donald Trump is right to be concerned about it, and also what he might do in connection with those concerns. Our guest is Thomas Dans. Thomas is a former senior official in the Trump administration's Treasury Department, served as a senior counselor to the Undersecretary of the Treasury for International Affairs, quite important position. He these days is the driving force behind something called American Daybreak, which is an advocacy organization supporting, among other things, America First policies towards the Arctic, an area of the world in which Tom has spent a lot of time and professional energy. I'm very pleased that he's with us to talk about some of his personal experience with this region and this particular topic of Greenland. Tom, thank you so much for taking a few minutes. We ran into each other last night, so this was a pretty spontaneous thing, but I couldn't be more pleased that you came.
Yeah, great. It's great to be with you, Frank. I'll always love to speak with Frank. Yeah.
Thank you. So you have some personal history in this part of the world that I think is interesting. Just level set with us a little bit about.
Yeah, sure. So, and thank you for that kind and generous introduction, and it's great to be with your audience here. Just by way of background, so I am probably in a small, finite group of Americans, but as I talk to more, I find out more that have ties back to Greenland, but basically owing to the U.S. defense of Greenland, going back to World War II, and in the interim period between then and now in the Cold War. So personally, that's because my grandfather was a U.S. merchant mariner and served in the defense of Greenland, which actually started before we entered the war. So there's a lot of history here, and we can talk a little bit about it today. But I think what Americans should understand, and when President Trump talks about how important Greenland is to our national security, this is nothing new. This is something that when we talk about making America great again. This is a recognition that started in the mid 19th century, and has proceeded since then. So like that's my own personal background came as a boy, hearing about my grandfather's stories on the Murmansk run and the trips up to Greenland, et cetera. And so that's where
So when you talk about the defense of Greenland, I suspect most people have no idea that was actually required. Was it the Nazis who were making a play for it?
Sure. Yeah, I think people have heard, that Denmark colonized Greenland I think around 1720 or so. But there was even Norse settlements going back. There were interim periods. So fast forward to 1940, right? And Hitler's on the march. And Greenland is
including through Denmark, as I recall.
Yes, yeah. So Greenland is a backwater place. It's very sparsely populated. There's probably about 18,000 Inuit so Greenland it's 3 times the size of Texas, and that's not easy for a Texan to admit. So this is an enormous place, right? And you have settlements around the coast, 1,800 miles, if you will. Difficult to maneuver in. Basically, you get there at that point in time, mostly by ship or boat, occasionally by aircraft. But about 400 Danes. So 18,000 Inuit, 400 Danes, and a couple in a colony. Hitler moves on Denmark at that point. I think it's April 9th of 1940. So this is a year. Remember, we didn't enter World War II until Pearl Harbor, right, formally. But we were very clear that we were neutral, and we were particularly concerned about the Western Hemisphere. So the jumping off point is the recognition that Greenland is part of North America. So when we talk about this is greater America, it's always been that way. And he rolled into Denmark, and, unfortunately, the place fell within 3 hours. It's a classic story of a surprise attack, but with a whole bunch of buildup to it, that in hindsight, it was easy to recognize.
When you say rolled in, how did the Nazis get there?
Well, it's a fascinating story. I mean, they first came in as tourists even. They toured the equivalent of, I think it's a castellet, which was the like a 16th century castle that still served as the Danish realm's pentagon, if you will. Back then, they walked up and the fellow gave them a tour. Showed them the back door, the front door, where the guns were kept, et cetera, how many people would be on. And so they were completely surveilled, with even the German generals that came back the next week and rolled through, scouting the place out. So, they're contiguous with Germany. So they had a border that was difficult to defend, but they were so lightly guarded. Yes, they had cut their military in half. I think from 15,000 to 7,000 in the preceding couple years. They had signed a non-aggression pact, which we knew wasn't worth the paper it was written on. And they weren't trained up. So,
well, and plus they were 1,000 miles or so away from Greenland. They were not in a position to do anything about it. So did the Germans just fly in and use light infantry to take over?
They actually, it's one of these blitzkrieg things. They actually parachute in, and I think it's all about 3 hours between like the 4 a.m. invasion and the time they hang it up in Copenhagen. It's sad. It's you say you could have been seen, but like the king was out at the theater the night before. There were awareness of it, but it was not taken seriously that it could happen. And
And so, frankly, I must tell you, I'm not familiar with this story. Tell us what the defense of Greenland amounted to under those circumstances.
So immediately, the Brits were on to what was happening. Right, they suspect
they were at war with the Germans. At that point.
Yeah, and that this was part of the triggering event. There was a ship in Norway, so the kings of Norway and Denmark were brothers, right? And there was a British ship that was being held, or about 300 Brits being held in the hold of a ship in Norway, and the Brits made a fantastic rescue of these. And that kind of, because Norway was supposed to be...
Norway had fallen to the Germans.
Yes.
Previously.
So the Germans rolled across. At that point in time, the next day, Iceland declared its independence on April 10th of 1940. Right, and Greenland was left completely unattended and alone at that point. They didn't even have a police force, a constabulary force there. So you kind of move forward, not even weeks, and the Canadians and the Brits kind of won at that point in time, come to Roosevelt and say, hey, we're going to take on Greenland because we can't let this happen. We require something, called cryolite. So we talk a lot about critical minerals and the value of strategic. Yeah.
We have to take a short break, Tom, and we've spent much more time on what's important history than I meant to, but this is a great story. We'll finish it up, and then we'll turn to the present day situation with Tom Dans of American Daybreak right after this.
I have a weight loss question for the doctor. I'm tired of crazy diets and supplements that haven't worked. Yeah, weight loss shots work, but that's not for me. Any advice?
Great question, and I hear your frustration. Weight loss injections work in part by controlling blood sugar and appetite. But injections aren't for everyone, so doctors created a new generation weight loss supplement. This is non-prescription lean, and the science behind it is impressive. The studied ingredients in lean are intended to address weight loss in 3 powerful ways: help maintain healthy blood sugar, help control appetite, and help convert fat into energy so you burn it faster. But listen, lean is not for casual dieters with only a few pounds to lose. Lean is for frustrated dieters who want to lose significant weight at a healthy pace.
Get 20% off with discount code TRIM at TakeLean.com. That's code TRIM at TakeLean.com. TakeLean.com.
I got this $1,000 camera for only $41 on Deal Dash.
DealDash.com. Online auctions since 2009. This PlayStation 5 sold for only 50 cents. This iPad Pro sold for less than $34. And this Nintendo Switch sold for less than $20.
I got this KitchenAid stand mixer for only $56.
I got this barbecue smoker for $26.
And shipping is always free.
Go to DealDash.com right now and see how much you can save.
If you're over 50, imagine you could turn back the clock on your stiff, achy joints 10, even 20 years. Imagine you could do this without products that just temporarily hide the symptoms and may have side effects. Imagine no more. Introducing Instaflex Advanced. Get a complimentary sample just by texting FIND to 321-321. Instaflex Advanced is different because it targets the root cause of joint soreness and stiffness. It doesn't just cover up symptoms. Instead, it bathes your joints in its unique combination of 5 key natural ingredients found in no other product. Key ingredients backed by 5 clinical studies. Instaflex Advanced is so powerful, you could have better knees in just 1 week. Maybe that's why it's the #1 selling joint brand at GNC. But you can only get your complimentary sample by texting FIND to 321-321. Plus, text now and we'll include a tube of Instaflex pain cream with its exclusive oxygenated oil for fast-acting relief from the pain of arthritis, backaches, and sore muscles. Absolutely free. Text FIND to 321-321.
Welcome back. We're visiting with Tom Dans about a very important issue, it turns out, but one about which I know nothing, I confess, and I suspect most of you may be equally clueless, namely Greenland, its history, its strategic importance, and why it's on Donald Trump's agenda to ensure that it remains free of, the kinds of things that happened in World War II, for example. Finish quickly, if you could, Tom, this story
so,
about the liberation of Greenland.
Real fast through the timeline, and I'd also take the opportunity to commend to your listeners if they're interested in there's a great film on Netflix. It's called The Good Trader. It's a Danish-made film, but it highlights the role of really a heroic individual who was the ambassador from Denmark to the United States at that point, and he swung into action. And basically, in the following weeks after the collapse to Nazi Germany, he requests and organizes the U.S. help to rescue Greenland and to protect it from Nazi destruction. So that's when weeks later, the Department of the Treasury, my old home, dispatches the first ships up there because the Coast Guard used to be under Treasury. Right, and we actually, the Treasury, the Comanche, and the Campbell go up there, and they take over a mine in the south of Greenland that produces cryolite. Cryolite plays a crucial role because it's an element that's used to refine aluminum. And it's the sole source in the world at that point in time. Today it can be made synthetically. At that point, it was required, so we had to have that. Ultimately, had we lost that mine, we would have never built the 300,000 aircraft that the U.S. delivered across the globe and helped and deliver the air power advantage that knocked won the war on 2 fronts, right? 3 fronts. And so that's where we talk about the value of strategic minerals and the U.S. preemptively securing things. Now, they did another important thing, which was they knocked out the weather stations on the east coast of Greenland. That at the time, 1940, Hitler was preparing to invade the UK in Operation Sea Lion. But our ships went up there and interdicted them and took them out. So this is important.
Those weather stations would have been important to his understanding of the weather for Britain.
All the weather in Western Europe starts there on the east coast of Greenland. So if you were going to invade the UK, you had to have a good sense of the weather window. And that was the same case on D-Day.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So this all, in the end, translated into overrunning the German presence
and taking over Greenland and
before we entered the war, though, Tom?
Before we entered the war.
Did American forces actually participate in disarming the Germans, or how did that work?
We took the boats. The boats were Norwegian and Danish boats, and we arrested the.
Fascinating. Well, this is a bit of history that we'll explore further with you on another occasion, I hope. But let's talk quickly about the present moment.
Yeah.
There are other ships of concern operating in those waters these days. In fact, the Arctic is alive with Russian and Chinese vessels, I'm told. What's the strategic assessment of the importance of Greenland at the moment that seems to be top of mind for Donald Trump?
Sure. So again, the geography for the listeners, they'll may be familiar with the, I'm sorry, something beeped through here, but the Greenland, Iceland, UK gap, right, which is a key shipping point, a choke point, particularly from the North Atlantic up to basically Murmansk area, the Kola Peninsula, where the Northern Fleet for the Russians, or used to be the Soviets, now the Russians are based. So that's a key point that was key to control in World War II and remains the case today. Now, with climate changing, meaning an increased navigability in the Arctic, things are loosening up, right? So you see a big push in Russia, the Northern Sea Route becoming a trade lane. Transpolar transportation is on the horizon, right? And this is a corridor that would be used. So it's right now that we don't even have a very good surveillance capability or a presence there in the Arctic. We're just icebreakers is a major issue for us. The Chinese, I think they have something like 5. They've got another 2 under build now. We're waiting to see a heavy.
And they claim to be an Arctic adjacent power.
Yeah,
I'm told.
They call themselves a near Arctic nation, whatever that is.
which is not the case, obviously.
No.
So there's a strategic imperative to ensuring that Greenland does not become either a resource for precious metals, rare earth metals, or for colonization for other purposes, as well as having, a controlling position on this critical trade and strategic
and recall, even going back to the Cold War, and our original basing there was when we built Thule Air Base. Right, today it's B2FIG Space Base, renamed last year. That was so important because that's kind of the halfway point between Washington and Moscow. That was supposed to be both our distant early warning system, which we set up there, as it was a potential refueling spot because we couldn't do mid-air refueling at the time. So for in the scenario you had to travel up to Moscow.
Yeah, remember we have a huge, I think it's pave pause radar up there that is monitoring ballistic missile launches.
There's a lot. At one point in time, we had 11,000 U.S. troops in Greenland. During the war, we had 17 different air bases. We had Deepwater Port. We don't have a Deepwater Arctic port today. We had one in World War II. We built icebreakers during World War II in 8-9 months. Today they take 10 plus years. So there's a lot of lessons if we remembered our history.
Yeah, and we fail to remember it at our peril. So quickly, what are you recommending at the moment be done about Greenland? What do you think President Trump is considering doing?
Yeah, I think Greenland, it's important for the U.S. to understand its history, to understand the significance of Greenland from us. Everything President Trump talks about starts from protecting America and the American people. That is the first and most important. Yes.
We have 2 minutes. I just need you to tell me, so how do we do that?
Okay. So first off, we need to strengthen Greenland and the protection there. Ultimately, it's the Greenlandic people's choice how they would like this partnership to proceed, and we need to engage with them. We need to respect our Danish partners and have this conversation, have a real partners level conversation. But there's significant upgrades and investment that needs to happen, and quickly.
Upgrades is one thing. Donald Trump, as I understand it, has been talking about buying the place outright. Again, that would presumably require buy-in from some of the interested parties that you've mentioned. But is really the right answer, as he seems to think, to essentially have it become part of the United States itself in order to protect it?
In a way, I would say it's already part of America. I talked to you about this story. We have protected it since May 3rd of 1940. We've never left. We're never going to leave. We have, beyond thousands of Americans who've given their lives, and not my family, but the people my grandfather served with, we've continued to be the security architecture and infrastructure there. So we're already, deeply vested into Green. What ultimate form the partnership takes is for President Trump and his team to decide with the Greenlanders and the Danes. But I certainly wouldn't take anything off the table. And I think we're fortunate. Yep.
We'll be watching this very closely with your help, Tom. I'm so glad you were able to make yourself available. And frankly, I just was very keen to learn about some of the history, your own personal family history, among other things.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for giving us that context as well as what's over the horizon. We'll be watching with you. Folks, stay tuned. We're going to come back and we're going to talk more about, missile threats to our country with Bob Joseph right after this.
Here at Allegiance, we feel like American flags should be made in America.
When we started Allegiance, we were shocked to learn how many American flags were actually being made overseas.
Every flag we make is proudly crafted in the USA with superior materials.
Join us in our mission to keep the American flag truly American.
Visit showallegiance.com to order your high-quality American flag today. That's showallegiance.com.
Anyone home?
In here, Aunt Jean.
How's it going, honey?
There's a lot to take care of. More sympathy cards.
Your mom was well loved. I hope you know how grateful she was to have you.
I know. Speaking of grateful,
what is it?
It's a check from United of Omaha Life Insurance Company. Mom's life insurance.
Life insurance? So soon?
Just like they said.
My sister, always looking out for her family.
I can still hear her. I don't want my bills to be your problem. This check will help a lot.
If you're age 45 to 85, you can't be turned down for up to $25,000 in life insurance from United of Omaha. Policies start at just $6.38 a month, and benefits could be paid in as little as 24 hours.
How did she qualify? You know, with her health issues.
With these policies, health issues don't matter. She was so relieved.
Policies are available with no health questions, no medical exam, no blood tests.
I just assumed life insurance would be way over my budget.
No one kept a tighter budget than Mom. If she can manage the rates, you can too.
But did her rates go up every year?
Nope. There's a rate lock built into the policy.
Policies start at just $6.38 a month. Your rate is locked in for life. The cost of a funeral can be $9,000 or more. With one call, you can give your loved ones the protection they need to help pay these costs. And unlike some policies, benefits are payable from the first day.
Mom just felt better knowing we'd have help, and I couldn't be more grateful. You should call United of Omaha.
I guess I'll never stop learning from my big sister.
Don't put off life insurance. Call United of Omaha today.
Call 800-274-2851. You can't be turned down. Call today to lock in your rates. 800-274-2851. That's 800-274-2851.
Welcome back, and I'm going to say a very special welcome in a moment to our next guest. His name is Robert Joseph, a man of considerable experience. I'm going to talk a little bit about, in connection with one topic in particular, his outsized contribution to the security of the United States. Let me set the stage for it with a few comments of my own. Ever since 1972, when the United States entered into the Anti-Ballistic Missile, or ABM Treaty, with a country that no longer exists, the Soviet Union, the American left and establishment Republicans have contended that U.S. security depends on our being, well, basically completely vulnerable to attack by long-range missiles. In 1983, my old boss, Ronald Reagan, famously challenged this obvious insanity. He was excoriated for proposing that it would be better to defend American lives than avenge them with something called mutual assured destruction. The resistance to Reagan and his apostasy was so great that it took 20 years or so for President George W. Bush, and a dozen years after Reagan's policies interred the USSR, to withdraw the United States from the addled ABM Treaty. But he and his successors ever since have severely limited our anti-missile defenses, so much so that we remain essentially unprotected against all but a very small-scale attack. Fortunately, Donald Trump has promised a revolution of common sense. In a world where Israel has suffered massive missile attacks and defenses against them are obviously needed, he has commonsensically declared America will have its equivalent of Israel's Iron Dome system. Former Undersecretary of State Robert Joseph played a pivotal role in freeing us to have such defenses and offers the common sense recommendation that Mr. Trump make the centerpiece of an American titanium dome space-based sensors and interceptors that are the most effective and least costly way to dissuade missile-wielding enemies from attacking us and, if necessary, to prevent them from doing so. Let's roll. Those are my thoughts. For more of them, follow me at Frank Gaffney on X and at securingamerica.substack.com. And please consider supporting the work we do by going to visit at usfuture.org, our new Institute for the American Future. Thank you. Well, let me just say about Robert Joseph that in addition to being a man that I have worked with for decades, going back to the Reagan administration, as a matter of fact, where we both served in the Defense Department, he is a dear friend, as well as one of my most admired examples of a man who has committed himself with tremendous distinction to public service. He's gone on to many other things, finishing up as an Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Affairs. His contribution that I just mentioned is the subject of our first segment. We're going to talk about Donald Trump's thoughts about the need for missile defense of the United States, something he promised on the campaign trail, something he's now putting in motion, and what we really need to do to help him realize that goal, both quickly, because it is urgently needed, and with the greatest cost effectiveness possible. Bob Joseph, welcome back to Securing America. We haven't had you on in too long. It's good to have you back, sir. Welcome.
Frank, thank you for the invitation and the very generous introduction. I appreciate
it's
it.
Deserved, fairly deserved.
Good to see you again.
It's good to see you, my friend. Let me start by asking you a little bit about this sort of ideology of vulnerability. You have fought it as long as I've known you. We started working together on Ronald Reagan's idea of a strategic defense initiative. You were instrumental in the George W. Bush administration in helping the president get us out of the ABM treaty. Give us a little bit of the context here, Bob, as to both how we got in this fix and why it's so important that Donald Trump be turning it around.
That vulnerability equals stability in our relationship with the Soviet Union was one that was well beyond conventional wisdom. It was a sacred text in the view of most defense intellectuals, most of those engaged in the nuclear offense deterrent, and it was the guiding force of our nuclear posture for 3 decades. I never bought into it. I always suspected that it had exactly the opposite effect. And it was President Reagan who first articulated the notion that defenses could actually be stabilizing, could actually enhance deterrence. But that notion was continued to be subverted by both in particular by Democrat administrations, but also with a good number of Republican in support of that. It wasn't until the Soviet Union literally went away after it was defeated in the Cold War, by Ronald Reagan, I would point out, that that we were able to free ourselves from the ABM treaty and deploy.
But even then, it took over a decade to do it, Bob, and it wouldn't have happened if it weren't for you and your president at the time, George W. Bush. No?
Well, exactly. I mean, the first Bush, Bush 41, wanted to get out of the ABM treaty but didn't. He did have a very significant, a very robust plan for defenses. It was called the Global Protection Against Limited Strikes, which included space-based as well as land-based interceptors. But his program was canceled by the Clinton administration. In fact, it was the first day in office that Secretary Aspen, you'll remember Les Aspin, Secretary Aspin announced publicly and gleefully that he had taken the space out of the stars out of Star Wars. And it was after that that the Bush administration, Bush 43, George W. Bush, came into office at the end of and declared that we needed a capability, a defensive capability, against rogue states like North Korea. And so to do that, we had to exit the ABM treaty, and we did have our first deployment in Alaska primarily of ground-based interceptors. But in the more than 20 years since then, we have not moved very far forward on strategic defenses, on defending the homeland.
Yeah. But Bob, here's the kicker, that as you sort of just pointed out, the idea of defending ourselves was confined to only the most limited of attacks, at the time North Korea's, which, by the way, has been ever since building up the capability for an even more formidable attack. But what was that about? Why was it thought necessary to not be able to contend with other adversaries and more serious threats?
Well, part of it was the notion that we could not develop such a capability because the technology wasn't there, which is clearly not the case today. We have the technology to develop an effective space-based capability, which is required, given the laws of physics, which is required if we're going to defend against Russia and China. If you go back to Ronald Reagan and the notion of developing defenses against the peer threat at the time, the Soviet Union, the idea was not to have an impenetrable shield. The idea was to be able to defend sufficiently against an initial attack such that the attacker did not have confidence that it could succeed. And therefore, you would strengthen deterrence. Therefore, it would be stabilizing. But again, that was not accepted. In fact, it was undermined, that whole notion, by every Democratic administration since then, including the Biden administration, which continued a very limited missile defense, but deliberately stated that we will not defend against Russia and China, even the type of coercive threats that we've seen over Ukraine from Russia, and that we're now hearing more and more from China over Taiwan.
And Bob, as you know so well, in the intervening years, both of those countries have massively modernized and otherwise improved their missile threats to this country, their nuclear threats more generally, but missile threats in particular.
Massively.
Yeah.
China is on a tear.
Well, and President Trump indicated that there may be some opportunity for disarmament negotiations with not just the Russians, but also the Chinese. I'm deeply skeptical about that, and I want to ask you, having spent so much of your professional life facing off with these kinds of folks in these kinds of arms control processes, as they're called, whether that's really a runner or perhaps at odds with common sense, if I can use that expression. We're going to talk more about what our options are for missile defense under what I would like to think of as not an iron dome, but a titanium dome for protecting America from space, which just makes common sense, as well as whether arms control will give us an alternative approach. Bob Joseph is in the house. Praise God. We'll be right back with him and more. Stay tuned.
I got this $1,000 camera for only $41 on DealDash.
DealDash.com. Online auctions since 2009. This PlayStation 5 sold for only 50 cents. This iPad Pro sold for less than $34. And this Nintendo Switch sold for less than $20.
I got this KitchenAid stand mixer for only $56.
I got this barbecue smoker for 26 bucks.
And shipping is always free.
Go to DealDash.com right now and see how much you can save.
Why is Navage trusted by millions?
Before Navage, I was not living my best life because I could not breathe. Constant nasal congestion, constant blowing of the nose. The huge difference is the fact that Navage pulls it out. It's very gentle in the sense of when that suction happens, it's literally grabbing that water and that mucus and it's bringing it out into this tank. It's worth every penny that you pay for it. This product changed my life.
Available at major retailers or online at Navage.com.
I have a weight loss question for the doctor. I'm tired of crazy diets and supplements that haven't worked. Yeah, weight loss shots work, but that's not for me. Any advice?
Great question, and I hear your frustration. Weight loss injections work in part by controlling blood sugar and appetite. But injections aren't for everyone, so doctors created a new generation weight loss supplement. This is non-prescription lean, and the science behind it is impressive. The studied ingredients in lean are intended to address weight loss in 3 powerful ways: help maintain healthy blood sugar, help control appetite, and help convert fat into energy so you burn it faster. But listen, lean is not for casual dieters with only a few pounds to lose. Lean is for frustrated dieters who want to lose significant weight at a healthy pace.
Get 20% off with discount code TRIM at TakeLean.com. That's code TRIM at TakeLean.com. TakeLean.com.
America is celebrating the start of President Trump's second term. Now, for a limited time, you can get the Kid's Guide to President Trump and a limited edition collectible pin for free. Hurry, supplies are very limited. Visit freetrumpbundle.com now. That's freetrumpbundle.com.
Attention homeowners. Are you behind on your mortgage payments? Is the bank threatening to take your home? Is your home worth less than you owe? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then you need to call this number right now.
Call 800-714-8615.
We're back, and we are continuing our very important conversation with one of the most distinguished public servants I've had the privilege of knowing over the years, former Undersecretary of State Robert Joseph. He is one of the unsung heroes of the effort to try to protect our country in, well, so many ways, but not least with respect to missile defenses that we squarely need in an environment in which not just Russia, not just China, not just North Korea, but scads of countries are in the business of building up missile threats, some of shorter range, to be sure, but some of considerable capability nonetheless. And Bob, before we get back to the technology that you're recommending, GPALS, as it might have been called in the old days, 2.0, I did want to just visit with you. You've been across the table from Soviets and Russians and others over the years, and you've, I think, got a very, well, commonsensical and well-informed view of the value of these various arms control processes, as they've been called. Perhaps a new day is upon us with Donald Trump in the White House, but what would you bet are the chances that the Russians and Chinese, or either one of them, to say nothing of both of them, having invested as massively as they have of late in nuclear capabilities and the priority that they clearly attach to it in their defensive or offensive posture, would actually talk about and act on getting rid of all that capability?
Well, I think the prospects are dismal at best. The Chinese have already responded to President Trump's comment about the prospects for negotiation, saying that they'll have no part of it until the United States and Russia come way down in their own numbers. Interesting point of view given where Russia and China have come together. The Russians are always open to a bad agreement, to an agreement that provides them with unilateral advantages. But when you think about Russia, my view, at their strategic level, they've already achieved superiority. And they have massive superiority in theater nuclear systems. And so the prospects that the Russians would provide us with any with an agreement that advanced our own national security interests, well, it's just not going to happen in my view.
Right, I don't think so either. But what can happen is they can talk us out of making investments in our own capabilities that then leaves us in an even more disadvantaged position. We've seen that played again and again and again. Despite your best efforts to resist it, I might say.
Agreement.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Never underestimate the prospects for a bad agreement.
Yeah, well, there's that, especially at our own hands. Bob, so get back to this question of space-based sensors and interceptors. You mentioned, and I do want to particularly acknowledge the great contribution of a dear mutual friend of ours, Ambassador Hank Cooper, who was, during the George H.W. Bush administration, responsible for the missile defense program known as the Strategic Defense Initiative, and came up with this so-called global, whatever it was, GPALS 1.0. Let me do that again. And came up with this idea of a space-based missile defense using so-called brilliant pebbles, GPALS, as it came to be known. Is that what you have in mind, or is it something markedly different? And why do you think it's necessary and actually cost-effective?
First of all, I think I would agree with you on the contribution of Hank Cooper. He was a pioneer in this area and made an incredible personal contribution to our national security. The technology has changed dramatically. It's advanced dramatically. And I think this has to do with both the capabilities that we can put into space as well as the cost. And we've been able to reduce the cost dramatically. Just think of what SpaceX is doing, what Elon Musk is doing, putting thousands and thousands of satellites into space at a cost that was unthinkable in the world of government until very recently. So both in terms of technology, whether it's
now he's doing it for
computing or
communications
materials,
purposes, obviously,
right?
Yep.
Or cost. We can do this now. And I'm very encouraged by the executive order that President Trump has signed in the last couple of days, instructing the Secretary of Defense to prepare a plan, an implementation plan, to provide the nation for the first time with an ability to defend against not just ballistic missiles, but hypersonic missiles, cruise missiles, all of the type of aerial attacks that could occur on the United States. And in order to do that, I mentioned the laws of physics, in order to do that, you have to go to space. And it's not just sensors, but it's also interceptors. And whether they're kinetic, like brilliant pebbles would have been, or whether they're advanced technologies, whether laser or other type of directed energy technologies, well, that's what we need to determine. But I'm very optimistic that we can acquire the technology, that we can deploy the capability, that we can pay for it, and I think it will be a fraction of the cost of what we're currently investing in the next generation land-based interceptors, which do not provide the capability that the president has called for against peer, non-peer, and rogue states. Because what we're doing today is just focused on rogue states, and I believe it doesn't even keep up with that threat, given that North Korea is also on a tear to build more nuclear weapons and missiles.
Including, they claim, they're getting hypersonic weapons, and
Yes.
those land-based systems are simply not going to do the job. Bob, we have to take another break here in just a moment. I wanted to say, I think your point about the laws of physics, as well as the costs associated with doing all of this from space versus doing it on the ground or even at sea, is incredibly important as we approach this with fresh eyes and common sense. I hope that we're not just going to see another plan take forever and not actually be implemented in the 4 years that we hope Donald Trump has to get this done. Hold the thought. We'll be right back with more with Bob Joseph.
It's an absolute problem. It happens all of the time. If you own property and have got equity, you can be a victim.
I'm here with Art Fitzenmeyer, a retired special agent with the FBI and senior advisor to Home Title Lock. Exactly what is house stealing?
That's a phrase I think that the FBI kind of coined when they first began seeing situations where people were forging documents, titles, and deeds, and using those documents to gain access to the equity in the homes.
How can a scammer actually steal my home?
In the digital age, it's so easy for them to get the original document.
All the information is out there, right?
It's out there. They can download it and forge it.
And if you take it down to the county clerk house, won't they know if there's something wrong there?
When a title is presented to a county recorder and it's completely filled out and it's notarized, then they're required by law to accept the document and file it. They can't
So it looks
challenge
good, they can't question it.
They can't question it.
Once the title to your home is stolen and you don't know it, what do they do with it?
They begin to find places to take out loans.
Oh, they don't want your home.
They don't want it. They don't need to go see it. They can do it all at arm's length, and you're left holding the bag because the loan company is going to come after you. 90, 120 days later, your life is going to take a terrible turn.
As a homeowner, what can I do to protect my title?
The only thing you can do is stop it before that first loan transpires. And that's what we do for you at Home Title Lock. We monitor your title with our software. If anything disturbs your title, we alert you that something has happened to your title. If the alert takes place and you call in, we go to work immediately on your behalf to get your title back in your name.
So how do you sign up with Home Title Lock?
Go to HomeTitleLock.com.
HomeTitleLock.com. That's peace of mind, isn't it?
You'll sleep better that night. Protect your home, and it's what we do, and we do it better than anyone else.
Did you know that thousands of authors across the country have written books and published them with Page Publishing? If you've written a book, Page can help you through the process. We cut through the confusion of the publishing world to make it easy for you. If we decide to publish your book, your work ends and ours begins. From copy editing and proofing to typesetting and book cover art, we get you printed, distributed, and sold on Amazon, Apple iTunes, and bookstores. We'll even promote your book.
Call 1-800-319-0257. That's 1-800-319-0257.
Welcome back, and welcome once again to Robert Joseph, former Undersecretary of State in the George W. Bush administration. Robert, we have been talking about something, and I did want to single out a really important article that you've written recently about all this in December, I think, in the Washington Times. Commend that to our listeners. But in terms of the ability to deter attacks by creating uncertainty, using these kinds of cost-effective and widely dispersed anti-missile systems in space, just makes, well, common sense. And I pray that it will be very much an option considered in this so-called plan. But what do you think about the chances that we'll see the bureaucracy in the Defense Department, as it has done repeatedly in the past, spending as much of a president's term as it possibly can get away with on the plan and postponing until it's too late to do much about it, the implementation?
Well, I can say that for the past 30 years, the antibodies in the Pentagon in particular, but also at the State Department and in other parts of the government, particularly, OPM and OMB and elsewhere, have prevailed and have been able to sabotage the prospects for building an effective missile defense. Even in the first Trump administration, you had the president going over to the Pentagon to introduce the Missile Defense Review in 2019. In his comments, he calls for a space-based capability. And it didn't happen. It wasn't part of the Missile Defense Review findings. And the Pentagon just proceeded to move forward with what it had done in the past. And that's been continued by the Biden administration. What will be required is the appointment of an individual who is held accountable to the president and who reports to the president, Of course, you have to build on the missile defense. You have to have the Missile Defense Agency, doing the implementation, et cetera. But you have to have somebody who is ensuring that the president's orders are being followed. And if that doesn't happen, we will once again see the same result we've seen in the past, and that is a strong policy statement, but not the follow-through in terms of the capabilities that we need to defend our country.
Well, let me just say, I have high hopes for Pete Hegseth in the job as Secretary of Defense. But as you know, Bob, from your extended experience on not just the State Department, but the Pentagon and also the National Security Council, you do need somebody whose day-to-day job is to get this done. And this is vital. It's common sense. I
have high hopes for the new Secretary of Defense as well, but I can just envision the 4 stars, 4-star after 4-star, telling him this is not the way to go. The people in the budget at CAPE telling him that we can't afford it. I mean, we've gone through this over and over again, and we need, again, to have someone who reports to the president and the president holds accountable, and have that person have the authorities and the resources to move this forward. We can do this if we can overcome our own sort of bad ideas.
Yeah, get out of our own way, as they say.
For decades.
Yeah. Bob, let me just say, it seems to me that, the importance of space more generally is going to have to get much higher visibility and attention in this administration.
And remember, President Trump created the Space Force.
He did indeed.
And so that's another, I think, very positive aspect to this.
Right.
I'm not known for my optimism, but I'm quite optimistic at this point.
You're a realist in the best sense of the word. Let me just say, Bob, that there's one other thing that I wanted to just quickly take stock with you on. When we were in the Pentagon together, we spent a lot of time trying to assure the reliability as well as the effectiveness of our nuclear deterrent. And one of the things that we resisted intensively was the idea that we should stop testing our nuclear weapons to maintain that level of confidence, both our own and, for that matter, our adversaries, in our deterrent posture. Regrettably, under the George H.W. administration, a moratorium on such testing was announced in 1992, and we have not tested a single nuclear weapon in a realistic fashion underground since then. I just would ask your professional assessment of the advisability of that. I happened to wake up this morning, to my astonishment, to a report from, of all places, National Public Radio about this individual reporter and others apparently getting a visit to our nuclear test site, no longer called the nuclear test site, by the way, because it's not been used for that purpose for so long. But what are your thoughts, Bob, on the need for testing, the importance of doing it realistically, that is to say with actual detonations in a safe and underground fashion?
I have never met someone who's actually tested a nuclear weapon in the past or designed a nuclear weapon in the past who doesn't believe that we need to test, to have an actual test. For over 30 years, we've been investing billions and billions of dollars in the stockpile stewardship program. I don't believe that that provides the confidence that we need, because our stockpile is very much aging. And yes, advanced computing and all of the techniques that are involved in the stockpile stewardship program provide us with some insight, but I don't believe it provides us with the degree of confidence that we need. We're talking about nuclear weapons here, and it's there's no margin for error. There's no margin for error, and I think testing would provide us with the ability to have confidence in the effectiveness, in the safety of these weapons, and I don't think there's a substitute. And as you look at the expansion that you mentioned of Russian and Chinese capabilities, There's a lot of evidence to suggest that they are testing.
Yeah.
Not,
They're
not
doing
at
it
full
because they
strength,
know they
but
need
enough.
to as they modernize their weapons.
Yeah.
Bob Joseph, there's so much more to talk about on that front, among others. We would very much welcome you back very soon for a longer conversation, if we may. But thank you for your time today and for your great service to our country, past, present, and future.
Thank you, Frank.
God bless you, my friend. God bless
Thank
the rest
you.
of you. We hope we'll talk with you next time, and that until then, you'll go forth and multiply.
Anyone home?
In here, Aunt Jean.
How's it going, honey?
There's a lot to take care of. More sympathy cards.
Your mom was well loved. I hope you know how grateful she was to have you.
I know. Speaking of grateful,
what is it?
It's a check from United of Omaha Life Insurance Company. Mom's life insurance.
Life insurance? So soon?
Just like they said.
My sister, always looking out for her family.
I can still hear her. I don't want my bills to be your problem. This check will help a lot.
If you're age 45 to 85, you can't be turned down for up to $25,000 in life insurance from United of Omaha. Policies start at just $6.38 a month, and benefits could be paid in as little as 24 hours.
How did she qualify? You know, with her health issues.
With these policies, health issues don't matter. She was so relieved.
Policies are available with no health questions, no medical exam, no blood tests.
I just assumed life insurance would be way over my budget.
No one kept a tighter budget than Mom. If she can manage the rates, you can too.
But did her rates go up every year?
Nope. There's a rate lock built into the policy.
Policies start at just $6.38 a month. Your rate is locked in for life. The cost of a funeral can be $9,000 or more. With one call, you can give your loved ones the protection they need to help pay these costs. And unlike some policies,